Okay. Y'all ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We will see what the final numbers foretell, but I've always been a realist, and at this point, based on the numbers I see, I think that I'll end up losing this election. And so I just wanted to lay out a couple thoughts in that process. And oddly, Marshall was kind enough to come up and check on me just a minute ago. I in some ways feel like Jimmy Stewart in being the luckiest man alive. And I say that because I have family here with me. I've got friends here with me. I've been able to spend the day with a whole lot of folks who've been supporters over a long number of years. And I want to start with family. And so Marshall, Landon, Bolton, and Blake, I am incredibly proud of each one of you. You guys are the apples of my eye. And I thank you so much for being with me right now. And I love you guys. So thank you for being here. And if you stop at life alone, I can't go wrong in life with these four guys by my side. And so
That's all that matters.
absolutely. So I want to begin there. I want to say, Sarah, thank you for being here with Sandy and Nick. And I didn't see Nick, but I saw Bill. And I thank you for y'all's work in the last couple of weeks' worth of effort. It meant a lot. And I see my extended family here. So I see April behind me. She knows. I don't know. She didn't know I could see her, but I could see her. And I think about April and the number of years we've worked together, and what an incredible job you and Marie and Olivia, and I could go down the whole list of the team. What you've done in working for folks in this district and making a difference in their lives is none other than remarkable. And I want to say thank you. And thank you to my extended family. I see Brian McCullen over there. I see John Kuhn. I don't know where Jim Wheeler went. He probably left. But Jim is funny. He called me. We went to college together. He called me from Boca. He lives down in Boca. He says, "I'm worried about this race. I want to come up and be with you." And so friends like that mean the world to you in a chapter like this. So and then where do we start? With the Carlton crowd, Marianne, and Chad, and you could go to each of the different counties, the difference y'all made in this race in terms of working. What you did in Bluffton, I really appreciate. Mike, I always appreciate your friendship. I see Jerry and Mark. You guys are the best. Jerry and Mark have been with me since I first got into elected office, and so I won't do the name thing, but I am just incredibly appreciative of family and friends here with me. And whatever you do in life, if you got those two pieces in place, life is good. And so I begin with that. I also want to say it has been an absolute honor to have represented the 1st District of South Carolina for the last 5 years. I grew up in these parts. I will die in these parts. It is home. I love this part of the world, and I love the people in it. And turn this phone off.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And so I just have a couple of thoughts in light of tonight. I wanted to say I began this morning praying, God, help me to humbly accept whatever the voters decide tonight. And I read through actually Micah 6:8, which the boys can recount. It's been drilled into them, which is to say that we're to do justice, we're to love mercy, and we're to walk humbly. And if you read in James 1:9, it says we're to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And both of those verses are about this basic notion of humility in all that we do. And with that, I want to not only humbly accept the voters' verdict in terms of tonight, but I also want to say I humbly offer a couple of different thoughts on sort of what this night means for me. And I'd say, so one, I think it's a reminder of the inflection point that we're at in American politics. I've never quit doing what I said that I would try and do. I was rated #1 in the whole United States Congress in efforts to watch out for your pocketbook or your wallet. But those things aren't really selling right now in Washington, D.C., and they're not selling in this district. And I need to accept the fact that I did my part in terms of trying to represent the people that I represent based on the promises I made in running for office. And whether or not they're buying that product is up to them. But I haven't backed away, and nor will I ever back away from the importance on doing something on spending. Whether it sells or not in a political sense doesn't matter. But what does matter is what Admiral Mike Mullen said when asked, and this is a military guy, what's the biggest threat to American security? His answer is the national debt. We have a profound crisis coming our way, and again, whether or not it sells in this particular moment in time of politics doesn't matter, but we have all got to confront the reality sooner or later, because if not, the financial markets will do it for us, of we have an incredible hurricane coming our way, and we can look the other way, or we can deal with it. But we need to recognize the way in which we are at an inflection point with regard to American politics. You know, I would just say, as we deal with big issues like that, it's important, one, we have a little bit of James and a little bit of Micah in humbly looking at how we listen better to each other, whether we're Republican or Democrat, in solving these big problems. Because, you know, a lot of these town hall meetings I've had over the last couple of years, they're vigorous. And people tell you what they think, but oftentimes they're not listening that much to each other. And if we're going to solve these problems, again, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever you are, one, we got to be humbly listening. But two, it's important we not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a belief, based on people's legitimate frustrations with Washington, which is what brought about the whole Trump era, that maybe we just need to throw out the institutions of Washington and start all over. To do so would be a grave mistake. Our founding fathers had an amazing wisdom in the way that they created a political system that I have come to respect mightily. And this idea of an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch, each with co-equal checks upon one another, is vital to the fabric and the working of our system. And so is democracy hard? Yeah, it is. Is it painful? Yes, it is. Is it at times cumbersome? Yes, it is. But compared to every other political system around the world, it is absolute genius. And it was the genius of the Founding Fathers that set that system up, and I think we need to be very careful at this inflection point in American politics to pay heed to what they watched out for. Because if not, you go the route of so many civilizations before us, which is to take the comfy route, but the route that is the seeds of that civilization's undoing. And, you know, Hayek wrote about this in The Road to Serfdom. People become disenchanted with the way in which democracies work. A strong man comes along, they say, well, you've got to give up some freedoms, but if you do so, I'll take care of this problem for you. We've got to stay true to this notion of the democratic principles that our Founding Fathers laid out. I would... the Republican Party is at an inflection point as well. We had a big debate, and again, the promises I've made and kept over the years aren't selling in this particular political climate. That does not mean that they're not relevant and not important to our lives, but more importantly, as it relates to party, not important to sustaining the Republican Party. So I believe in not just being a party of less taxes, but indeed less in the way of government. I fought hard on that front. It's important as we sort of think about where we go in this modern time of politics that we stay true to this idea of not just being about less in the way of taxes, but less in the way of spending. The same is true on trade. If you go to the port in Charleston, you see a lot of stuff come in and a lot of stuff going out. And we've historically engaged with the rest of the world on trade because we flat out said, we can beat you. We're Americans. At the end of the day, our mousetrap will be better than your mousetrap. But that's not the world in which we're living in terms of some of the conversations on trade. I think as a party it's important to stay true to that notion that we've always had. Similarly on this notion of engagement. You cannot lead as a country if you're not engaged with the rest of the world. If you think about the numbers, we're less than 5% of the world's population. We're less than 20% of the world's economy. If we don't engage with the rest of the world, it will be to our detriment. And finally, I'd say as you think about the Republican Party, of late, and that which many of us are struggling with is Washington the answer? We had a real debate, for instance, in this debate, on whether or not there should be a voice for people in the local community on whether or not we should drill offshore. And my point was, this fundamentally was a debate about federalism. Not about whether you're for or against offshore, but a debate about, does Washington indeed know it all? Are these decisions to be decided unilaterally and uniformly in Washington, or can more decisions be made at the local level? Because when mayors and city councils come together in accord across my district, my point was, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? I think it's important you listen to that local voice. It's what I've always tried to do. And again, that's not necessarily a political message that's selling these days, but I think it goes to the heart of the fabric of the way that the Founding Fathers divided power. Because they divided not only horizontally with the executive, judicial, and legislative branch, but they divided it vertically, with those powers not, again, given to the federal government, were limited to the state and local government and the individual. I believe in inverted pyramid, and at times I think we're just a touch confusing that these days in Washington and what the party's about. And lastly, I'd make one final thought, if I can find it here, and that is it's fairly unusual for a president to tweet in a congressional race. I don't know that the last time that happened in a Republican primary, but it happened today. And so I want to address that for one last second. And I think it's important to do so. Because a lot of people would come up to me over the course of this campaign, they say, you for or against Trump? And I'd say, I'm neither for nor against Trump. I'm for ideas that I've long stood for over the entirety of my time in politics based on limited government. And inasmuch as he agrees with those ideas of limited government and market principle, and the voice of local folks, I'm going to agree with the president. And on those issues on which he disagrees, I'm going to disagree with the president. It may have cost me an election in this case, but I stand by every one of those decisions to disagree with the president, because I didn't think it, at the end of the day, was either concurrent with the promises I made when I first ran for office, or the voices of the very people, the first district that I represent. And so So it was interesting in his tweet, said I didn't support whatever. If you look at my votes, I fully supported the agenda. And this is where I think it gets important. I want to be clear of the agenda that I have always believed in. And if you read it, it's actually for us as Republicans. South Carolina Republican Creed says the following. It says, I will never cower before any master save my God. It is my heritage to stand erect, proud, and unafraid, to think and act for myself, to enjoy the benefits of my creations, to face the whole world and say, I am a free American. That's the South Carolina Republican Creed. And when you stop and think about it, we have an amazing birthright in South Carolina in terms of independence. So they're just a couple miles from where we are, out on Fort Sumter, not on Fort Sumter, excuse me, out at Sullivan's Island. Literally, you had patriots, South Carolina patriots, fighting Cornwallis and British troops 200 years ago, and there's 200 years plus of tradition of strong independence with South Carolinians. And so I stand by that notion of we are a nation of laws and not men. It is part of the creed that I believe in as a Republican, that I am indeed to cower before my God, but before no man. And that means I'm to cower before not only a God above, but a constitutional framework of government that our founding fathers in genius gave us. We are to cower before those two things. And we're to cower before the people that elected us. And I get their verdict tonight. But I think, again, going back to this inflection point that we're at in American history, there's been too much made of, are you for one personality or against it? what we're about as a nation is not being for or against one personality. Again, we're a nation of laws and not men, as the Founding Fathers said. And I stand by that belief, though in this case it may have had significant electoral consequence, but that means I'm going to get to spend that much more time with these 4 great boys, and for that I'm grateful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.